Now at this time, we're going to get to hear from our main speaker, and it's a privilege to introduce to you tonight Dr. Rob Lane. And Rob is a retired oncologist, and he loves to come walk alongside people and help them navigate their cancer journeys. And he also is a speaker and an author, and he and his wife Suzanne live on Fox Island, here where we are, and we are really blessed to get to hear from him now.
Hi. I'm Rob Lane. I'm a medical oncologist, that is a cancer doc. I'm Suzanne's husband, and I'm the father and grandfather to a passel of kids. And I love to take them adventuring all over in the wild. But there's been no greater adventure than journeying with Jesus. I'd been reading Isaiah, I think it's 40:31. They who wait upon the Lord will rise up on wings as eagles. They shall run and not faint. And I just wasn't quite sure exactly what that meant. So I asked the Lord, and a month later, I got the answer. I was up in the Arctic hunting with one of my sons. I was alone in camp. I came around a Christmas tree. There's nothing bigger than a Christmas tree in the Arctic. And to see a golden brown, 8-foot grizzly bear standing on top of my gun and clothes and books. And they look at you under their brow, and they kind of weave back and forth. And I had a plan, because I'm terrified of bears. And the plan starts with, speak softly. So I said, shoo bear, easy bear, everything's fine, in just a kind of a soft voice. And they usually just walk away, but that didn't work. So I went to 2, and 2 is back up slowly. So I did that, and I walked back about 3 steps. By that time, I was behind the tree, and I couldn't see the bear, so the bear couldn't see me, and I took off running. And I ran out across the stream and up on the hillside, and I figured I'd see the bear just trashing camp looking for the meat. But the bear was galloping after me, and I galloped 2 legs at a time. The only other thing in my playbook was lie down and play dead, because grizzly bears generally don't eat you. They just bat you around till you stop resisting, and then they leave. So I ran back at the bear, and I jumped up on a rock, and I put my hands up in the air, and I growled and I screamed at the bear. And it stopped about 15 yards away. And it looked at me, kind of cocks its head one way or the other, and they kind of hold their arms kind of like a prairie dog. And meanwhile, I am praying like crazy, Lord, take this bear away now, emphasis on the now, bring my son and the guides and their guns back now. And then I heard a booming voice behind me say, wait and trust. Wait and trust. Wait and trust. And I turned around and looked. There's nobody back there. And I realized, oh, that's the Lord. And what he means by wait is wait and trust that he's on it. The bear is like 15 yards away. He's like from me to that light over there. He stood up and he looked at me, kind of canted his head this way and that way. And then he got down and he walked along the creek. It's as if the Lord had said, bear, you ain't crossing that creek. He walked along the creek, he stood up, he walked back, he stood up, and he just lay there and crossed his paws, and he just looked at me. For some reason, I got inspired to sing. I'm not a particularly good singer, but I started singing praise songs that I learned in young life. My God, how great thou art. Oh, with the deep love of Jesus, and a whole bunch of songs. I'm just booming it out. And thank heavens, that might have scared the bear away, for all I know. But what I did experience was that while I was singing, I was completely at peace. And after a while, I ran out of songs, and I stopped singing. And then this just creepy, started creeping back in. So I thought, I'm going to sing some more. So I started singing, and that feeling went away. So as long as I was worshiping the Lord, I just felt fine. And so that went on for 4 hours. Then the guides came back, and They're way down there and I'm way up here. And they said, hey, where are you? I said, I'm up here. There's a bear down there. Well, at any rate, that's kind of when the story ended. We slept with our guns loaded. And so some of us really need to be hit over the head with a 2x4 to get some of God's messages. And I'm one of those. I want to focus on P. That's capital P-E-E, which stands for personal experiential evidence that Jesus is who he says he is and that he keeps his promises. But I never imagined writing a book or public speaking until a voice awakened me at 3 a.m. with, it's time for you to get up and start writing what I've been teaching you through your patients. Because I knew it wasn't me. I've got no interest in writing whatsoever or speaking. But I got up and I started writing, and that brings me to now. Uncertainty is the most profound, universal, and lifelong condition of our existence. And it's also the greatest opportunity to get God involved in our lives. My patients had all the routine stuff, but they had a lot more uncertainties and what-ifs when they heard the words, "You've got cancer." They'd all met Jesus, and they were all heaven-bound, but their responses were dramatically different. Some of their lives crashed, just like those who had no faith at all or other faiths. But in spite of the big uncertainties, some of them led amazing lives, and they changed my life. Let me tell you about one of them. His name was Wendell Price. Wendell was a 55-year-old, healthy, fit young man who came in my office on a Friday afternoon complaining of his track times were slowing down. Examination was totally normal. Blood was totally normal, except he was just a little anemic. But under the microscope, he had the cells of acute myelogenous leukemia, the worst leukemia there is. And I had to go back and tell him that, and tell him that he had 3 choices. If he did nothing, he would live 8 to 11 weeks. We couldn't cure it back then. We're doing a whole lot better now. We could give him some mediocre stuff in the office, and that might double his survival. But the good news was, if I put him in the hospital immediately and just gave him some awful stuff and kept him there for 6 weeks, nearly killed him, he could get out 6 weeks later and have an 80% chance, or there's an 80% chance he would get out and be complete remission and have a couple of years of normal life to live. Wendell looked off at the corner of the room for just a moment, and then he looked back and looked me in the eye and he said, my life's verse is Philippians 1:6. He who has started a good work in me will finish it. And he said, the cool thing about that is that he doesn't say how much time he needs. He just says he'll finish it. But there's the caveat, I need to walk into my calling. I need to be listening to his advice in order for him to finish the work he's started. So, Doc, just give me whatever you can that'll get me on the pulpit in 3 days, and for every Sunday as long as you can. I was stunned. Nobody has not taken the good stuff. So I said it all over again. I basically said, look, give me 6 Sundays right now, and I'm going to give you back over 100. And without even blinking, he looked me in the eye and he said, I'd rather trust God's promises than doctor's statistics. So just give me what you can. So I did. I gave him the lousy stuff. 2 weeks later, he was in complete remission, where he remained for the next 2 years. And I got to have wonderful conversations with him. He never claimed he was cured. He was thankful for the time he had. One of his parishioners, an 80-year-old woman, came in and said, you're Wendell's doctor, aren't you? And I said, yes. She said, he is so smart. I listen to him preach every weekend, and it goes right over my head. But since he told us about his leukemia, he preaches right from his heart, right to mine. It's wonderful. The size of the church has doubled. Wendell was amazing. Let me tell you about the mother of Becky Donnell. Becky was a cute 18-year-old. She was just back from Malibu, and she had a lump on one of her ribs, which when we biopsied turned out to be Ewing sarcoma, which is just an awful sarcoma that kills virtually everybody except for a rare few who are treated very aggressively. So I treated her very aggressively, and within a couple of weeks, she was deathly ill in the hospital. No red blood cells to carry oxygen, no white cells to fight infection. Well, she did have some red cells, but not enough. But she had no white cells, and she had no platelets. She was bleeding all over the place. Her mouth was just caked with blood. She was delirious. She was on all kinds of antibiotics. And her mother, her sweet little mother, was sitting by her side, cleaning the crust of blood off her mouth, praying over her day and night. When we give people chemotherapy, their blood counts go down, usually at 10 days, and they're usually back up at 21 days, 3 weeks, when we give them more chemotherapy. However, Becky's counts didn't recover at 3 weeks. They didn't recover at 4 weeks. We were out to 4.5 weeks, and they had not budged at all, and Becky was dying. I was devastated. I had evening rounds. I went in to tell her Bob that I'd given her too much, and that she was dying. And her little mother reached up and put her arm around my shoulder and said, "It's okay, Doc. If she gets better, she goes home with me. And if she doesn't, she goes home with Jesus." I was just blown away. Where do you get a faith like that? Some of the answer comes in Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, that is, pray, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Becky Donnell did recover out at 5 or 6 weeks. She took more chemotherapy. She was cured. Now, this chemotherapy is so toxic that everybody is infertile after it. Becky got married. She never relapsed in the years I followed her. Then she disappeared. But after about 10 years, she came back and came into the office with her 4 kids. I mean, God just does cool things. So the question is, how do you get P? And the answer is about 5 things. You pray about everything. And if you keep a prayer journal, you'll be astonished over the years at how many times there are answers to your prayers that even you recognize. They're all answered, but we miss a lot of them. Learn to listen. Listening is hard. It takes practice. Those whispers are not always real loud. Sometimes they're audible, but most of the time they're just whispers. And you listen to words that jump off of Scripture when you're reading in the morning, or words from your pastor or from your granddaughter that just pop out to you. And you watch for things that change in circumstances when the Lord shows up. Watch, wait, walk. You've got to walk into what He says. If you don't trust Him enough to walk in and pursue the course that He suggested to you, you don't get to build up any evidence about how good His answers are. Let me tell you about Sue Wright. She was one of my mentors. Sue had an awful tumor in her pelvis. The whole thing had to be removed, and then she had radiation, and then she had heavy-duty chemotherapy, and she was out a couple of years. When I ran into her, I caught up with her at Cutter's Point in Gig Harbor. And she was sitting there having coffee and knitting and just smiling and happy. And I sat down with her and said, "Sue, how are you doing?" She smiled. She said, "I'm doing great. I'm out 2 years. I might even be cured." But then she ducked her head and turned over her shoulder and whispered, "But the dragon's always behind the door." Now, that was the best metaphor for people things they'd told me about their fear of cancer returning. And so I said, Sue, what's that like? What are you talking about? And she said, it's all the what ifs. All the what ifs. What if my cancer returns? What if I have to take treatment more? What if I don't get to see my daughter graduate from college? What if I never get to meet my grandchildren? She says, all those what ifs. They wake me up in the middle of the night and they keep me awake. Or just when happiness is breaking out at a party or something, more what ifs show up and just throw water on my happiness. And I said, wow, that's awful, Sue. What do you do about it? And she smiled and she said, I changed the question. I say, what if Jesus is who he says he is? And what if he keeps his promises? And she said, I know he does. I've been praying since I've been a little girl. And he showed up over and over and over. He keeps his promises. I know he does, and he will forever. So the message is that our lives are filled with uncertainty, with what ifs, troubles, just like the Lord promises. And every single one of them is an opportunity to give him a chance to show up and show off. Thank you.